Hi everybody, welcome back to another book talk video. Today I'm going to share with you one of my all-time favorite books. It is Elizabeth Spires' The Mouse of Amherst. This was actually one of the very first books that got me interested in poetry. It's also the first time that I heard of Dickinson, who to this day is one of my all-time favorite poets or poetesses. My parents got this for me. I'm not sure exactly what year, but it was published in 1999. It is Mouse of Amherst by Elizabeth Spires. The artwork is by Claire A. Nivola. I believe that's how it's pronounced. It is a very thin hardcover book. It has one of Emily Dickinson's poems written on the back. The artwork is in black and white. The internal artwork is in black and white. The only color that you're going to see is on the front cover. I'll read the synopsis for you. When Emmeline, a white mouse, moves into the wainscoting of Emily Dickinson's bedroom, she discovers her literary kinship with the great poet of Amherst. "I'm nobody. Who are you?" Emily asks, and with Emmeline's reply begins a lively correspondence where mouse and myth become fast friends and in the process inspire each other to new poetic heights. Included in this enchanting mouse's eye view of the pleasures and perils of life in Emily Dickinson's world are 8 of Dickinson's most loved poems, with 7 corresponding poems by Emmeline published here for the first time. So it is a fiction book, but it incorporates small aspects of the life of Emily Dickinson, as well as her family. I'll show you the front cover. This is the house that Emily grew up in and lived in until her death. As I said, it was published in 1999, and it follows the story of Emmeline, who is a young mouse who wears a white dress and a white pinafore, pretty much the same as Emily Dickinson did. And I really like the way that this is a very easy read. The typeface, I'll give you an idea of the typeface. I doubt that you could find a large print version of this, but the color of the paper is not a stark white. It's a little bit more on the cream side, so it's easier on the eyes. But as you can see, the pencil drawings are very delicate, detailed, but not overly detailed. And they're inserted in between the text on various pages. And I really like the way that Elizabeth Spires writes. It's an easy read. I would recommend this, not regardless of whether or not you have children, regardless of whether or not you're interested in poetry. This is a relaxing and uplifting book for adults as well as children. This is perfect for the entire family. And you do really feel what's going on in the story with the way that Elizabeth Spires writes. Uh, it goes from the moment that Emmeline moves in to the house at Amherst. And Emmeline is the one who narrates the story, and she's telling it from memory, so it's sort of like a flashback story. And they're early on in the course of the plot. I really like how she expresses this the state that you're in, not just as a writer, I'm sure that other creative people have this too, but you know that the state that you're in just before you even know that the creative process is about to happen just before that spark of inspiration hits. When you feel like nothing is going to change, there's nothing unusual that's going to happen. There's nothing that really holds your interest. You're expecting life to just go along the way that it always has. That calm before the creative storm. She expresses that really, really well, I think. So Emmeline and Emily begin corresponding in the form of little notes. Uh, because for those of you who don't know, Emily Dickinson, at least this is how she's portrayed in the story. I haven't been able to purchase a complete collection of her work yet. That is one of my goals eventually. I do definitely want to add that to my library. And if possible, a biography, I can find it. I'm not even sure that anybody has really written a biography of her, in part because there isn't very much known about her life because she became very reclusive. But the story really captures finding your inspiration in life, finding that moment when the world starts to open up to you. But I like that it's not portrayed as a moment when you feel like the world is your oyster. I mean, there is a certain amount of innocence and carefree in Emmeline because she's a young mouse. Um, but there there are trials and tribulations that she goes through, and then there are trials and tribulations that she observes Emily go through. And she doesn't really understand all the facets of Emily's life, but Emily becomes aware of Emmeline and corresponding first on the backs of Emily's poems. She would write a poem, and then Emmeline would find it, turn the paper over, and start writing a reply on the back, like pen pals. And I like how she describes finding that thing that touches you in a way that few things can, and that really sparks your motivation. Even if you're not creative, I think that's something that pretty much everybody sooner or later is either challenged to find or gets hit upside the head with. So you get a little insight into their daily life. Their friendship evolves over time. Emmeline gets to, you learn a bit about the Dickinson household through Emmeline, but you don't hear, there is no first person narrative from the Dickinson side of things, from the human side of everything. Everything is from the mouse's side, which I think is an interesting twist because since she's a mouse, Emmeline doesn't always know what's going on. And Emmeline begins to spontaneously, this is something that all writers experience, I think. We're constantly writing inside our heads because every time something happens, we're thinking of how we would describe that in words, which I think also helps with conversation and verbal skills. Because writers, we don't necessarily talk a lot, but if we find something interesting to talk about, can be very eloquent, generally speaking, on that subject. That's something that I've noticed when listening to other writers speak. I mean, I don't think that we talk a lot. At least I know I don't talk that much. But and there, one of my favorite parts is when Emmeline is hiding under the dining table because she will. The family eats first, and then Emmeline hides under the table and listens to them having their meals and talking. And then when they start to leave and the table is cleared away, she runs out and gets the crumbs. She imagines the meal that they're having, that the humans are having, while she's hiding from the cat, because the Dickinsons have a cat. And there is one one page. Well, actually, I should say one illustration that is a double page illustration. I'm not going to show that because I think uh, if I show too much, that might violate the copyright. But their friendship, Emmeline's and Emily's friendship, really starts to develop as they communicate exclusively through poetry. Uh, I don't think you don't get the impression that there's ever a time when Emily actually sees Emmeline. Emmeline is always able to observe her, but there's only there may be one possible time when she might see, but the majority of the time you get the impression that she doesn't actually see her. She just sees the notes that are left. Also get a little glimpse at Emily's attempts to have her poetry published, which she wasn't really all that successful at. She was constantly rejected. Her work was constantly rejected all throughout her life. And the majority of it wasn't published until after her death, and it was published by her sister with the help of a friend who worked very hard to try to decipher Emily's writing because apparently her penmanship was not all that great sometimes. But I think we can overlook that. I think a lot of creative people have a tendency to get very messy when they're writing. But I highly, highly recommend this book. It's a very friendly book. You may have noticed that recently I've begun putting in the description box for the video whether or not the book that I'm referring to in the video is family friendly. And in most instances recently, they haven't been. But I came across this when I was cleaning out the closet, and I thought, oh, I have to read this because I could never get enough of it when I was younger. And it's just as good as I imagined, well, as good as I remember it being, and as characters are as simple yet vibrant as I remember them. I would say probably now as an adult, I don't know if it necessarily has greater meaning to me, but I think it has deeper meaning just by virtue of the fact that I'm older. Even if I wasn't still writing, I think it would just the adult perspective, it's very different. Because as a child, you're captivated by the imaginative aspect, the idea of a mouse wearing a dress, a mouse who can speak and write just like people can. And that still captivates my imagination, but there's a depth to the book now that I recognize, and an enjoyment aspect too that I recognize as an adult and I can appreciate as an adult that I couldn't appreciate really as a child. So, highly recommend this book. And if you haven't really been interested in poetry, it's not all poetry, it's storytelling. You only have excerpts of poems in here. And I believe Elizabeth Spires is the one who writes the fictitious replies in the form that that Emmeline is writing to Emily, because apparently Elizabeth Spires has also written poetry, a book of poems, I believe. Yes, four collections of poetry for adults. So I may look into that because I do like her writing style. So if you can find this, I haven't looked to see if I can find this on Thrift Books, because you know Thrift Books has become my go-to place for finding practically everything. But you can probably find it either at Barnes and Noble, or you may be able to ask Barnes and Noble to order it. I don't think it's out of print. I think it's still in print. And it's easy to hold, as you can see. It's thin, like I said. The typeface isn't minuscule, even though some of it is supposedly written by a mouse. And the pencil drawings are really, really nice. I really, really like the pencil drawings. They're perfect, I think, for the story. And it's held up really well. I would read this several times a week when I was growing up. And the book itself looks like it's practically new still. So this is definitely worth the investment. I think that a lot of people would enjoy it, even if they're not interested in poetry. It's a fun book. It's a calming book. It's something that you can sit down and read in a single afternoon. You can probably get through this in 30 minutes to an hour. That's how short it is, but it's very enjoyable. That looking back, I actually thought this book was longer. That's how much I enjoyed it. I didn't realize it was as short as it was. I don't remember it being this short. So I hope you're having a good day. It's pretty cloudy and rainy today. That's why I'm filming in the window again. And let me know if you do decide to read this book, if you can find it at the library, or you decide to purchase it or borrow it from somebody who may already have it. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. And I will be seeing you pretty soon with a gratitude tag that I'm doing in honor of Thanksgiving in November. Bye. Happy reading.